Okay.
Gets a good starting point.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get that one. I couldn't either.
No, is this one hung up? Let's start with the story about Freedom Land.
Oh, I remember hearing Benny once at Freedom Land, an entertainment park at the north of the Bronx. A lot of bands played there, and he'd put a band together for this week, and he had a huge crowd. He had Cootie Williams on trumpet. That was before Cootie went back to Duke. And after a very successful set, he was to introduce a girl singer who'd had a hit record. And he gave her a big build-up. He said, I'm sure you've all been waiting to hear this singer whose hit is you've heard on every radio station and jukebox. And he went on with a fine flow of language about this singer, and then he had to turn to the band and turn to her, rather, where she was in the wings, and say, and what's your name? Of course, there was a big hoot of laughter, but the poor girl came out and did her stuff. And the next day, I ran into Cootie Williams in New York somewhere, and we were laughing about this, and I said, but where was the bass player? He said, oh, he fired him the night before and forgot to get another one. Well, Cootie was one guy that really admired Benny, and for one reason, he was, I don't think he was afraid of anybody. The so-called Ray didn't mean a thing to Cootie. But I found many of the black musicians who worked with Benny spoke highly of him. Panama Francis, the drummer, for instance. And
hold on, excuse me for interrupting. Let's cut for a second. If you can't, if try not to say he too often, slip in a Benny here and there, just so we know who he is.
Yes, I see.
But otherwise,
it's because where you want to cut it.
And if you come back to Panama Francis, he was with the Savoy Band, right? The regular
award. Did you read about that?
Yeah. What regard? Right. Okay. Start with Freedom Land again.
Well, I remember Benny was playing once at Freedom Land, a kind of amusement park at the North Bronx. A lot of bands played there. He'd put a band together, I think, for the week.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry, Stanley. I have to forget. I think you're looking right lensward.
I'm not looking at you enough.
Look my way, or look to this side of me.
All right, fine. Yes, okay. Right.
We'll just start again.
Yeah, I remember once Benny was playing at Freedom Land, a kind of amusement park in the North Bronx. A lot of bands played there, and I think he'd put the band together for the week. He had Cootie Williams on trumpet, and that was before Cootie went back to Duke Ellington. And they played a very good set, and they were well received by a big audience. And getting towards the end of the set, they were to bring out a girl singer. And Benny gave her an enormous introduction, saying, this is what you've all been waiting for. I'm sure you've heard her record on the radio and on jukeboxes, and just the hit of the year. And having carried on like this, he had to turn to her and say, and what's your name? Well, of course, this meant a big hoot of laughter, but the girl did her thing and was also well received. Well, next day I ran into Cootie again, and we were laughing about this, and I said, well, how come there was no bass player in the band? And Cootie, he laughed. He said, well, he fired the one we'd got the night before and forgot to get another one. Well, Cootie was an excellent musician who admired Benny, and I think wasn't really afraid of anybody. But generally I found that black musicians spoke well of Benny. Panama Francis, the drummer, who really made his name with the Savoy Sultans at the Savoy Ballroom, he spoke well of Benny. And of course, when I was interviewing Lionel Hampton for the interview that I published, it was published in my book, The World of Swing, he was full of praise. He said Benny idolized guys like Johnny Dodds and Jimmy Noon, the two early New Orleans clarinet players that were in Chicago. And he said when Charlie Christian and I got into a groove, there would be tears in his eyes, in Benny's eyes. He said he felt the music. He had a lot of soul. And
excuse me for that was marvelous, Stanley. If you don't mind starting the bit again about he said when he and Charlie got into a group.
Oh, yeah.
Say Lionel said.
Yeah,
Again,
just,
so we remember
just a
this.
moment. Just a
Take a
minute.
break and
I want to just check.
tell us about all of them too.
And you just go like this a little bit, flatten out
Your hair just got
messed up by the glasses. Yeah. Fine.
Okay.
terrific.
Lionel Hampton, too, when I did the interview, which was eventually published in my book, The World of Swing, he couldn't have said nicer things than he did about Benny. Well, first of all, he said that he idolized Johnny Dodds and Jimmy Noon, the two new...
I'm sorry, Stan. Again, we just get the T's get confused in film. Say, just specify who this he is.
Yeah,
And
okay,
we're all right.
okay,
We're doing good.
I got it, yeah.
You
All
can
right.
start again with...
Start again,
No,
yeah.
just start from the point where you said Lionel said that Benny idolized.
Well,
those
yeah,
guys.
all
And then
right,
again, Lionel
fine,
said-
because that other stuff needn't be in there.
we got already. We can
Well,
cut
we've
it.
got to have that in. I
We
really
can
have.
cut it. We can cut
No,
the
but-
two together.
Yeah, but we need to keep it in to cover. Yeah. Well, Lionel said that Benny idolized Johnny Dodds and Jimmy Noon, the two early clarinet players from New Orleans who were in Chicago in the 20s. And later, Lionel said when he and Charlie Christian were playing together and really got into a groove, he said there would be tears in Benny's eyes. He felt the music so much. It had so much soul.
That's marvelous. Let's talk about swing and some of the ideas that you expressed about swing in the prologue of that book. That you just compared it to
Well,
Viennese waltzes and
all right.
airplanes.
Yeah, well, nobody's really ever been satisfied with the definition of swing, or really come up, to my mind, with a very good one. You ask Basie, who knew more about it than anybody. He says something about music that you can pat your foot to. Well, that's not really adequate, because you can pat your foot to a whole lot of different kinds of music. I always used to liken it to a prop plane taking off, rushing along the runway, throbbing and shaking as the engines are roaring away, and then when it takes off, and you've no longer got all that vibration from the earth, and it's flying through the air, that's like swinging, or it's the difference between a band that is just chugging away with a steady rhythm and a band that is swinging. One reason it's difficult to define is that it's not peculiar to jazz. I mean, the Cigani Gypsies, those old bands used to swing like mad. And I think the Viennese used to swing the waltz all right. And the Cuban bands, they swing for sure, but it's a different form.
And of the white bands, I mean, you said Basie was probably the expert. Of the white bands, what was it about Benny And I mean, he seemed to prefer the small groups. And do you think there was anything particularly swinging, or what was the secret to his swing, if you would have to put your finger on it?
Well, Benny certainly swung. There's no question about that. You take the original inspiration, we'll say, from Jimmy Noon, who's a very lyrical, melodious form of clarinet. But Benny, like everybody in Chicago, every musician in Chicago in the 20s, must have been influenced by Louis Armstrong. And obviously that rhythmic attack that he had and that drive is partly derived from Louis. And the fact that he also had that very marvelous technique on his instrument.
That's very helpful. Are there any of the other musicians that are associated with Goodman that you'd help us peg or set up, either Lionel or Teddy? Just any stories that would sort of put them, defining moments, if you remember your interchanges with Lionel Hampton or with Teddy Wilson, to give us a sense of what kind of guys they were, or about them and Benny.
Well, Teddy Wilson and Lionel are, in a sense, almost opposites, I would say. But, of course, when Teddy began, his major inspiration was Earl Hines, who, again, was strongly influenced by Armstrong and influenced Armstrong. Well, Lionel told me that when he first met Goodman, he could play all of Earl Hines' old solos, including his theme, Deep Forest. But Teddy Wilson, who was greatly helped by Earl Hines, he refined that style rather. He made a much smoother thing of it and less rhythmically stirring. But Lionel, to this day, is a kind of rhythmic powerhouse. He's never happy than when he's got the whole crowd jumping, as you know. And Teddy's thing was more intellectual or cerebral than Lionel's.
That's very nice. All right, I think we covered the things that we talked about. Unless there's anything else comes to mind that you would like to throw in.
Well, somebody you said that Jimmy Maxwell said that Cootie liked the band. I left that out. I knew that.
How about? You talked to so many black musicians about the history of jazz and how it evolved. What do you think was the importance, in terms of other musicians' careers or musically, in the fact that Benny did have an integrated band? That he did give blacks a chance to play in his band, that he introduced them to a larger audience. My understanding is that jazz, in a sense, as a business, if you take apart the musical creativity of it, but that just as a phenomenon, when the Depression hit, jazz was in a bad way. Records stopped being bought, artists were getting fired from recording contracts, or not getting contracts. And then he got interested in it again. Suddenly it was swinging. And blacks were playing in white bands.
No, that's not really true. Despite the Depression, you only have to look at discographies to see the enormous, well, not enormous, but considerable number of jazz records that were being made all through the Depression. What people forget is that at that time all these bands played for dancing. Ballrooms were the thing. Now, when Benny comes in, the ballrooms still go on, but the music has now become so popular that it goes into big movie houses and it goes on to vaudeville stages, goes into a place like the Apollo, had a band every week. The big bands there were so many at that time, and they were not suffering that much. I mean, they didn't get an enormous amount of money, but
what about, though, the integration question? The fact that, in a sense, he was bringing the closest thing to black music that a lot of white audiences had ever heard. He changed the musical tastes, in a way, of America.
well, he definitely broadened it. Sure. I mean,
My question won't be there, so put it in your words.
Yeah. Well, obviously, jazz at that time became the popular music virtually of America, and that was very largely due to Benny Goodman. Not because he'd integrated the band, but because, what he was playing, it was mostly the best part of what he was playing. The arrangements were by Fletcher Henderson and Jimmy Mundy. Jimmy Mundy was Earl Hines arranger. Fletcher Henderson was a leader of what had been the best band in the country apart from Duke Ellington's. So, Benny's big mission there, the integration, was very important, of course, but it was really that he broadened the popular appeal of jazz enormously. He became a kind of hero figure to young people.
And do you think he made any difference? Do you think Teddy's breaking the color line, did that matter to other black musicians?
Well, yeah, that was.
My question won't be there. So.
That was very. What Helen told me about that, but that was very significant. That here he should be playing in a fairly elegant hotel in Chicago with a black pianist. That was very important. And apart from the moral of it, it was also. It turned out to be commercially important. You know, and when he adds Lionel, you have two black musicians playing with the band.